The wedding dress hung in Lila's closet like a ghost she hadn't invited. White silk shimmering with promises that felt heavier every time she looked at it. She'd picked it out 3 months ago with Marcus by her side, his hand on her lower back, his voice in her ear saying she looked perfect. That was before she found the texts, before she saw the photos, before she walked into their shared apartment and found him with Vanessa, her cousin Vanessa, tangled in sheets that still smelled like the lavender detergent Lila had bought just last week. The Omega instinct in her had screamed, mate, bond, forgive, but the woman in her had packed a bag, walked out, and never looked back. What she didn't know then, standing in that doorway with her world crumbling, was that the real story was just beginning, and it had nothing to do with Marcus at all. 6 weeks later, Lila sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, staring at a job posting for a museum archivist position, and wondering if starting over meant running away or running towards something. Her Omega biology had made her sensitive to rejection in ways that felt almost physical. The severed bond with Marcus left her nauseated for days, her scent shifting from warm honey to something sharp and defensive that made other wolves give her space on the sidewalk. Her best friend Jade had told her to take time, to heal, to not make any big decisions, but sitting still felt like drowning. So when the job posting appeared, and when she sent in her application on a whim, and when they called her 2 days later for an interview, Lila let herself believe in signs. The universe owed her something good, didn't it? The interview was in Seattle, a city she'd visited once as a teenager, and remembered mostly for rain and a feeling of possibility. She drove up the coast with her windows down despite the October chill, letting the salt air strip away the last of Marcus's scent from her skin. The museum was smaller than she expected, tucked into a historic district with cobblestone streets and buildings that looked like they'd been standing since before the city had a name. The director, an elegant beta woman named Catherine, walked her through halls lined with artifacts from the Pacific Northwest's early settlements, and Lila felt something settle in her chest for the first time in weeks. This was a place for forgotten things to be remembered. Maybe she could be forgotten here too, just long enough to remember who she was. They offered her the position before she even made it back to Portland. Catherine's voice on the phone was warm, almost maternal, and when she mentioned that housing was included, a small cottage on the museum's grounds that had been recently renovated, Lila said yes before she could think of a reason to say no. Jade thought she was being impulsive. Her mother thought she was running from pain instead of processing it. But Lila packed her life into boxes, donated the wedding dress to a thrift store, and drove north with a certainty that felt almost chemical, like her body knew something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. The cottage was perfect, in a way that felt almost suspicious. Exposed beams, a fireplace that actually worked, windows that looked out onto gardens wild with late autumn roses and herb patches gone to seed. The museum grounds were expansive, bordering a private forest that Catherine explained was part of the original estate the museum had been built on. There were trails, she said, if Lila liked to walk. There were also rules. No guests after dark. Respect the historical integrity of the buildings, and stay out of the East Wing, which was closed for renovations. Standard stuff, Catherine assured her, nothing sinister. Lila had laughed at that, but the word sinister stuck in her mind like a burr. Her first week was quiet, almost eerily so. She cataloged documents, digitized old photographs, and lost herself in the stories of settlers and shipwrecks, of territorial disputes and forgotten treaties. The museum saw few visitors this time of year, mostly school groups and the occasional historian. Lila worked alone in the archive room, surrounded by the smell of old paper and preservation chemicals, and felt herself begin to breathe again. At night, she walked the forest trails, letting her wolf surface just enough to sharpen her senses, to feel the earth under her feet and the wind carrying scents of pine and moss and something else, something that made her pause mid-step more than once. Another wolf, maybe. But the scent was always distant, always just out of reach, and Lila told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't looking for a pack. She wasn't looking for anything except peace. Then came the night of the gala. Catherine had mentioned it in passing, an annual fundraiser for the museum, black tie, attendance optional for staff but encouraged. Lila almost declined until Catherine added that it would be a good chance to meet some of the museum's board members and benefactors, people who might be useful connections for her career. So Lila found herself in a dress she'd owned since college, deep green and simple, standing in a ballroom she hadn't even known the museum had, surrounded by people who smelled like money and influence. She sipped champagne and made small talk, and tried not to feel like an imposter. That's when she saw him, tall, dark-haired, with eyes that caught the light like cut glass, and a presence that made the crowd seem to bend around him without anyone quite noticing. He was standing near the far wall, listening to an older man in a military uniform, and Lila felt her Omega instincts flare in a way that made her grip her champagne flute hard enough that her knuckles went white. Mate. The word hit her like a physical blow, undeniable and terrifying. She'd felt it once before with Marcus, but that had been a slow burn, a gradual certainty. This was immediate, absolute, and completely impossible. She didn't know him. She didn't want to know him. She'd just escaped one disaster and wasn't about to walk into another. But then he looked up, and their eyes met across the room, and Lila watched his expression shift from polite attention to something raw and shocked. He felt it too. She saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hand came up to his chest, like he was checking for a wound. The older man beside him was still talking, oblivious, and Lila took the opportunity to turn and walk quickly toward the nearest exit, her heels clicking on marble floors, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She made it to the gardens before she heard footsteps behind her. Wait! His voice was deep, controlled, but with an edge of something almost desperate. Lila stopped, cursing herself for it, and turned slowly. He was closer than she expected, close enough that she could smell him. Cedar and rain and something darker, something that made her wolf want to roll over and submit. She locked her knees and met his gaze. "You felt it," he said. Not a question. Lila swallowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." It was a lie, and they both knew it. He stepped closer, and she saw the way his eyes had gone slightly amber, the way his jaw was clenched like he was fighting for control. "I'm Dominic," he said, and held out his hand like they were at a business meeting, like her entire world hadn't just tilted on its axis. Lila stared at his hand, then at his face. "Lila," she said finally, and shook it. The contact was electric. Skin on skin, and she pulled back quickly, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't do this," she said. "I don't do mates or bonds or any of it. I just got out of something and I'm not interested in starting something new." Dominic's expression flickered, hurt, maybe, or understanding. "I'm not asking you to start anything," he said carefully, "but we need to talk. There are things you should know." Lila laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Let me guess. You're married, you're engaged, you have a whole pack waiting at home." He shook his head. "None of those things. But it's complicated." Of course it was. Nothing in Lila's life had ever been simple. "Then uncomplicate it," she said, "or leave me alone." She turned to go, but his next words stopped her cold. "I'm a prince," he said quietly, "of the Northwest Territories. And if you're my mate, that makes you a princess." Lila turned slowly, searching his face for signs of a joke, of sarcasm, of anything that would make that sentence make sense. But Dominic looked dead serious, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her stomach drop. "You're insane," she said finally. He shook his head. "I wish I was. But it's the truth. My family has governed the wolf territories in the Pacific Northwest for 3 centuries. We're not public, we're not in the news, but we're real, and we're powerful. And if the bond between us is what I think it is, you're now part of that, whether you want to be or not." Lila felt the ground sway under her feet. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She'd moved to Seattle to escape drama, to start fresh, to be alone. "I don't believe you," she said, but her voice wavered. Dominic reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, pulling up a photo. He handed it to her, and Lila found herself looking at an image of a grand estate, all stone and iron and ancient trees, with Dominic standing on the steps beside an older man who looked like him but harder, colder. There were guards in the background, people in formal attire, and at the bottom of the photo, a caption in elegant script, "Crown Prince Dominic Laurent." at the Autumn Council. Lila's hands were shaking. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm just an archivist. I work in a museum." Dominic's expression softened. "You're my mate," he said gently. "That makes you somebody, whether you feel ready for it or not. And I know this is overwhelming. I know it's not fair, but we don't get to choose these things. The bond chooses us." Lila handed the phone back, her mind racing. "What happens now?" Dominic exhaled slowly. "Now we figure it out. Together, if you're willing." Lila looked at him, really looked at him, and saw beneath the title and the shock of the revelation to the man himself. Someone who looked just as thrown by this as she was. Someone who was trying to be gentle, despite the enormity of what he'd just told her. "I need time," she said. He nodded. "Take all the time you need. But Lila, don't run. Please. There are protocols, traditions, and if the pack finds out about you before we've had a chance to present this properly, it could get dangerous." That word, dangerous, settled over her like a weight. "I won't run," she said finally, "but I'm not making any promises either." Dominic smiled, small and genuine. "That's all I'm asking." The next morning, Lila woke up convinced the entire thing had been a dream. But then she saw the business card on her nightstand, embossed, heavy stock, with just a name and a phone number, and knew it was real. She called Jade, because who else could she call, and tried to explain the situation in a way that didn't sound completely unhinged. Jade listened, silent for a long time, and then said, "So you're telling me you escaped one bad relationship and immediately bonded with royalty?" Lila groaned. "I didn't bond with him. It's a mate thing. It's chemical. I don't even know him." Jade sighed. "You need to be careful, Lila. You've been through hell with Marcus. Don't let some pretty prince with a good story sweep you into something you're not ready for." She was right, of course, but the bond was already there, thrumming under Lila's skin like a second heartbeat, and ignoring it felt like holding her breath underwater. She went to work, tried to focus on her cataloging, and failed miserably. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow made her think Dominic had come back. But he didn't. He'd given her space, just like he promised. It was Catherine who brought it up first. She appeared in the archive room just before lunch, her expression carefully neutral. "Lila, do you have a moment?" Lila looked up from a stack of shipping manifests. "Of course." Catherine closed the door behind her, and that small gesture made Lila's stomach tighten. "I wanted to ask you about last night. I saw you speaking with Dominic Laurent." Lila's mind raced. How much did Catherine know? "We just talked briefly," she said carefully. Catherine nodded slowly. "Dominic is a very important member of our community. His family is one of the museum's primary benefactors. I hope he didn't make you uncomfortable." There was something in her tone, something protective, and Lila realized Catherine was trying to shield her. "He didn't," Lila said. "He was very respectful." Catherine relaxed slightly. "Good. I just wanted to make sure. The Laurents can be intense. They have expectations." Lila wanted to ask what kind of expectations, what Catherine knew about them, but she didn't want to reveal how little she understood about the world she'd apparently just stepped into. "I'll be careful," she said instead. Catherine smiled. "I'm sure you will." That afternoon, Lila did what any sensible person would do when confronted with impossible information. She researched. The museum's library had an entire section on regional history, including territorial governance and indigenous pack structures. What she found was both enlightening and terrifying. The Laurent family wasn't just old money or old power. They were foundational. They'd brokered peace treaties between warring packs in the 1800s, established the territorial boundaries that still governed wolf populations today, and maintained a network of alliances that stretched across the continent. They were, in essence, royalty in every way that mattered, operating in a shadow government that most humans didn't even know existed. And Dominic was the crown prince, next in line to lead it all. Lila closed the book she'd been reading and stared at the wall. What had she gotten herself into? That evening, Dominic called. Lila stared at his number on her phone screen for 3 rings before answering. "Hello? It's me. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing. His voice was careful, almost tentative, and Lila felt some of her anxiety ease. I'm okay. Overwhelmed, but okay. That's understandable. I know this is a lot. Lila laughed softly. That's an understatement. There was a pause, and then Dominic said, Would you have dinner with me? Somewhere private, where we can talk properly. I know you have questions, and I want to answer them. No pressure, no expectations, just conversation. Lila wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to say no, but the bond was there, insistent and undeniable, and beneath her fear was curiosity. She wanted to know him. She wanted to understand what this meant. Okay, she said. When? Tomorrow night, I'll pick you up at 7. After she hung up, Layla sat in her cottage and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or if maybe, just maybe, she was finally doing something right. Dominic arrived exactly at 7, driving a car that was elegant but not ostentatious, and wearing jeans and a dark sweater that made him look less like a prince and more like a man trying very hard to seem approachable. Lila appreciated the effort. They drove in comfortable silence through Seattle's outskirts, eventually pulling up to a restaurant that was small and intimate, the kind of place that didn't advertise and didn't need to. Inside, they were led to a private room with a view of the water, and Lila realized this was how the powerful stayed invisible, by having access to spaces most people didn't even know existed. Over wine and food that was almost too beautiful to eat, Dominic answered her questions. He told her about growing up in a world where duty came before desire, where every action was calculated for political impact, where he'd been trained since childhood to lead a community most of the world didn't believe in. He told her about the pack structure, the council of elders, the rival families who would love nothing more than to see the Laurents lose their hold on power. And he told her about mates, how rare true mate bonds were, how sacred they were considered, and how his family would react when they found out. They'll want to meet you immediately, he said. They'll want to verify the bond, present you to the council, begin the formal courtship process. Lila's fork clattered against her plate. Courtship process? Dominic winced. I know how that sounds, but in our world, when a crown prince finds his mate, it's not just personal, it's political. There are ceremonies, protocols, announcements. It's archaic and invasive, and I hate it. But it's also non-negotiable. Lila sat back, her appetite gone. What if I don't want any of that? What if I just want to be left alone? Dominic's expression was pained. Then I'll respect that. But Lila, if we don't follow protocol, if we don't do this right, there will be consequences. Other families will see it as weakness, as disrespect to tradition. They'll challenge my authority, maybe even challenge the bond itself. How do you challenge a bond? Dominic hesitated, and in that hesitation, Lila saw real fear. There are old laws, old rituals. If another Omega can prove they're a better match, if they can seduce me or break the bond between us, they can claim the title instead. It's brutal. And it's rare. But it happens. Lila felt cold. So you're saying I have to play princess or risk losing you to some political marriage scheme? I'm asking you to give this a chance, to meet my family, to see what this world is like, before you decide. And I'm saying I'll fight for you, for us, no matter what you choose. But I can't do it alone. Lila looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the weight he carried, the impossible balance between who he was and what he represented. I need to think about it, she said finally. Dominic nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. But time, as it turned out, was something Lila didn't have. 3 days later, she was working late in the archive when she heard raised voices in the main hall. She emerged to find Catherine arguing with a woman Lila had never seen before. Tall, blonde, beautiful, in a way that felt weaponized, and wearing a dress that probably cost more than Lila's car. The woman's eyes landed on Lila, and her expression shifted to something calculating. You must be the Omega everyone's talking about, she said, her voice honey-sweet and venomous. Catherine stepped between them. Vanessa, you need to leave. Now. Lila's blood went cold. Vanessa. Not her cousin Vanessa, surely. But no, this woman had the same sharp cheekbones, the same cruel smile. "Small world," Vanessa said, looking Lila up and down. "I heard you'd run off to Seattle. Didn't realize you'd landed yourself a prince." Lila's hands clenched into fists. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa laughed. "I'm here to make sure you understand what you're getting into. Dominic Laurent is spoken for. His family and mine have been negotiating a union for years. You're just a distraction, a pretty little Omega who doesn't know her place." Catherine's voice was sharp. "That's enough. You're trespassing." But Vanessa ignored her, stepping closer to Lila. "Did he tell you about me? About how we grew up together? How our families expect us to marry? Did he tell you that I've been groomed for this role my entire life while you were playing human in your little museum?" Lila met her gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "Dominic chose me. The bond chose me. Whatever arrangement you think you have, it's over." Vanessa's smile turned cruel. "We'll see about that. I'll be at the Autumn Council next week, and I'll be making my case to the elders. May the best Omega win." She turned and walked out, leaving Lila shaking with adrenaline and Catherine looking grim. "What just happened?" Lila asked. Catherine sighed. "You just met your competition, and I'm afraid this is only the beginning." That night, Lila called Dominic and told him everything. He was silent for a long moment, and then he swore, low and vicious. "I should have warned you about Vanessa. I thought I had more time. She said your families have been planning a marriage. They've been hoping for one. But I never agreed to it, never even considered it. Vanessa is ambitious and ruthless, and she'll do anything to secure her position." Lila's voice was tight. "She said she challenged the bond at the Autumn Council." Dominic exhaled slowly. "Then we need to beat her to it. Lila, I know this is fast. I know it's not what she wanted. But if we present our bond to the council first, if we make it official before she can challenge it, she won't have any ground to stand on." "What does make it official mean?" "It means a ceremony. Not a wedding, not yet, but a formal recognition of the mate bond. It means standing before the council and letting them witness what we are to each other. It means claiming each other publicly." Lila's heart was pounding. She'd run from one disaster with Vanessa, and now here she was again, forced into a confrontation she'd never asked for. But this time was different. This time she wasn't running. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." She could hear the relief in Dominic's voice. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. If Vanessa wants a fight, she can have one. But she's not taking this from me. Not again." Dominic was quiet, and then he said softly, "Thank you for trusting me, for choosing this." Lila smiled despite everything. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't met your family." The Laurent estate was even more impressive in person than in the photo Dominic had shown her. It sprawled across acres of private land, a blend of old-world architecture and modern security, with guards posted at intervals that tried to be subtle and failed. Dominic met her at the main entrance, looking more formal than she'd ever seen him, his expression tense. "My parents are waiting," he said. "And I should warn you, my father is traditional. He'll test you. Try to see if you're strong enough for this role. Don't let him intimidate you." Lila squared her shoulders. "I've dealt with worse." Inside, the estate was all dark wood and stone, tapestries on the walls depicting wolf hunts and ancient battles, the scent of cedar and smoke thick in the air. They were led to a study where two people waited, a man who looked like an older, harder version of Dominic, and a woman whose elegance was so effortless it felt like a warning. King Marcus Laurent and Queen Elena. Lila felt the absurdity of her ex-boyfriend sharing a name with Dominic's father, but pushed it aside. This was no time for irony. "So you're the Omega who's captured my son's attention," King Marcus said, his voice measured and cold. Lila met his gaze. "I didn't capture anything. The bond chose us both." Elena smiled slightly, as if Lila had passed some small test. "Dominic tells us you're an archivist, that you work in the museum we sponsor." "I do." Marcus circled her slowly, and Lila forced herself to stand still, to not show weakness. "You come from no pack, no family of note. You have no training in pack politics, no understanding of our world. What makes you think you're qualified to stand beside my son?" Lila's jaw tightened. "I don't think I'm qualified. I think the bond decided I am, and I'm choosing to honor that." If that's not good enough for you, then you're questioning the will of the bond itself. And I doubt that's a tradition you want to break. The room went silent. Elena's smile widened. Marcus stopped circling and looked at her with something that might have been respect. You have nerve, I'll give you that. I've had to earn everything I have, Lila said evenly. I won't apologize for that. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Marcus glanced at their joined hands, then at his son. The Autumn Council is in 4 days. If you're serious about presenting this bond, you'll need to be prepared. Vanessa will challenge you, and she has support among the elders. This won't be easy. Lila lifted her chin. Nothing worth having ever is. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Elena took Lila under her wing, teaching her the protocols of the council, the names and allegiances of the elder families, the subtle power dynamics that governed every interaction. Lila learned that being a princess wasn't just about titles and ceremony. It was about strategy, about knowing when to show strength and when to show deference, about understanding that every word and gesture would be scrutinized. She also learned about Vanessa's family, the Morrows, an old pack with deep roots and deeper grudges. They'd been rivals to the Laurents for generations, and Vanessa was their best chance at infiltrating the ruling family. If she could convince the council that she was a better match for Dominic, that Lila was unworthy, she could dissolve the mate bond and claim Dominic herself. It was barbaric, but it was law. On the night before the council, Dominic found Lila in the garden, staring up at the stars. Having second thoughts? He asked softly. Lila shook her head. No, but I keep thinking about Marcus, my ex, not your father, about how he betrayed me with Vanessa, and now here she is again, trying to take something else from me. It feels like the universe has a sick sense of humor. Dominic stepped closer, his hand finding her waist. Or maybe the universe is giving you a chance to reclaim your power, to show her that she can't break you. Lila leaned into him, feeling the bond hum between them, warm and certain. What happens if we lose tomorrow? We won't. But if we do? Dominic was quiet, then said, If we lose, I'll renounce my title. I'll walk away from all of this, and we'll build a life somewhere else. Because I'm not losing you, Lila. Not to Vanessa, not to the council, not to anyone. Lila turned in his arms, looking up at him. You'd give up everything for me? Everything, he said simply. And in that moment, Lila knew she loved him. Not because he was a prince, not because of the bond, but because he saw her as his equal, as someone worth fighting for. Then let's make sure you don't have to, she said, and kissed him under the stars. The Autumn Council was held in a great hall deep in the forest, a structure so old it felt like it had grown from the earth itself. Wolves from across the territories gathered, their scents mingling in the cool air, their eyes watchful and judging. Lila wore a dress Elena had chosen for her, deep blue, elegant, but not ostentatious, a color that symbolized loyalty and strength. Dominic stood beside her in formal attire, his hand on her back, steady and sure. When they entered, the crowd parted, whispers following in their wake. Lila felt the weight of every gaze, felt the assessments being made, but she kept her head high. At the front of the hall sat the Council of Elders, 12 wolves, whose combined age probably reached into the thousands. And standing before them, radiant and smug, was Vanessa. She wore white, the color of purity and new beginnings, and her expression was triumphant. Prince Dominic, the head elder said, his voice ancient and resonant, you've called this council to present a mate bond. Step forward. Dominic and Lila approached, and Lila felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The elder looked between them, then at Vanessa. Vanessa Morrow has also presented herself as a potential mate. According to our laws, when there is a dispute, both parties must make their case. Vanessa, you may speak first. Vanessa stepped forward, her smile calculated. Honored elders, I come before you with respect and humility. I've been groomed since birth to stand beside Prince Dominic, to understand the duties and responsibilities of leadership. My family has served this council for generations. I am a known quantity, a safe choice. Lila, on the other hand, is an outsider. She has no pack, no training, no understanding of our ways. She may have caught the prince's eye, but infatuation is not the same as suitability. I ask you to recognize what is best for our people, not just what feels good in the moment. The crowd murmured, and Lila felt the shift in the room, felt the doubt creeping in. Then the elder turned to her. Lila, you may respond. Lila stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nerves. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not trained in politics. I don't come from a powerful family. But I understand something that Vanessa doesn't. That leadership isn't about pedigree or preparation. It's about integrity. It's about choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Dominic and I share a true mate bond, something that can't be manufactured or negotiated. That bond chose us for a reason, and I believe that reason is because together we can bring something new to this council. Fresh perspective, genuine partnership, and a commitment to serving our people, not just maintaining tradition for tradition's sake. Vanessa wants this title because she thinks she's owed it. I'm accepting it because I'm willing to earn it every single day. There's a difference. The hall was silent, and then Elena stood from where she'd been sitting in the audience. If I may speak, she said, and the elders nodded. I've spent the last 4 days with Lila, and I can tell you that she has something no amount of training can teach: courage. She walked into a world she didn't understand and chose to face it head on. She didn't run when things got hard. She didn't break when challenged. That's the kind of queen this council needs. Not someone who plays the part, but someone who lives it. Marcus stood next. My son has made his choice, and I stand with him. The bond is sacred, and to interfere with it would be to disrespect the very foundations of our culture. One by one, others in the crowd stood, voicing their support, until Vanessa was surrounded by people turning away from her. Her expression cracked, fury and desperation bleeding through. This isn't over, she hissed at Lila. You think you've won, but you'll never truly be one of us. You'll always be the outsider who got lucky. Lila stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. You took Marcus from me, and I thought it broke me, but all it did was clear the path to something better. So thank you, Vanessa, for showing me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is really the best thing in disguise. The head elder raised his hand, silencing the room. The council recognizes the mate bond between Prince Dominic Laurent and Lila. Let the records show that she is now Princess Lila, and any who challenge this union challenge the council itself. Vanessa turned and left, her supporters melting away, and Lila felt the weight of what she'd just done settle over her. Dominic pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. You are incredible, he whispered. Lila laughed, shaky and relieved. I think I'm going to need a very long nap. Later, Dominic said, grinning. First, there's a feast in your honor. And as they walked through the hall, hand in hand, with the pack's acceptance settling around them like a mantle, Lila realized she'd never felt more powerful, more certain, more exactly where she was supposed to be.